Death, raining blood, a sorcerer killing ninjas, all in the haunted region of Banyuwangi. This is the Banyuwangi massacre. It was a humid evening on the 1st of September 1998 for Pak Tafsir and his wife, Bu Miswa. They had just finished their evening meal after tending to the rice fields in the farm for the whole evening. Then there was a knock on the door. A young man spoke in a gravel tone.
"Grandfather, can I have a light?"
The old couple were taken aback. They had no progeny of their own, so who was this kind impostor outside their hut? Park picked up a club from near the door and held it tightly while Boo looked for a light. Park then opened the door. Outside were a mob of men clad in different clothes but distinct black cloth, covering their faces like ninjas. They grabbed Park by the throat and dragged him outside. His grip of the club fell loose and dropped by. Bu Miswa screamed for her husband, but her helplessness couldn't do a single thing except allow her to watch them wrap a rope around her husband's neck and tie him to the tree. She fled in panic and feared to the jungles. She spent the night processing what happened, but all of that was for naught, because when she came back, her legs felt weak as she broke down near her husband's hanging corpse. This was just one of the 150 strange executions that took place in the cursed town of Banyuwangi. Banyuwangi has always been considered a hotspot for black magic and the occult. The town's history has been marred with death and blood, and black magic doesn't seem to be too far off. Jason Brown from Inside Indonesia describes it as a mixture of animistic belief and Islamic mysticism that hails its roots from the 16th century. It arose from the ashes of the Sultanate of Mataram and the inter-religious conflict which ensued later. Nicholas Herriman, in his essay, Reciprocity and Sorcery in Rural East Java, identifies that amongst the 5,000 residents in Banyuwangi, at least 25 are sorcerers. These sorcerers rarely identify themselves because of their notoriety inflicting harm upon residents, even going far as killing them. To identify a sorcerer, one has to use the assistance of a shaman called Dukhan. Compared to the Malung in Afghanistan, they're mainly regarded as spiritual healers. One only approaches a Dukhan out of necessity and sometimes desperation. Then the Dukhan advises the victim on who is the potential sorcerer. Then he points them to the house. Once a target is found, the victim usually does an investigation to find the evidence. And evidence is usually found. Once that happens, the sorcerer's location spreads like wildfire, and you can guess what it leads to next. Witchcraft in Banyuwangi is very gruesome. Jason Brown describes that there are two types of dangerous black magic. The first one is sihr, and a common example of this is when a victim's stomach blows to such an unnatural extent that they look disfigured. The reason for this is because of nails, knives, and broken glass found in the victim's stomach. Rarely will a victim ever survive this experience, and if they ever do, they will lead a very painful life. He describes the second type, called rapu, where the victim is attacked with a lifelong illness that doesn't kill them, but instead causes them to suffer. Such illnesses are paralysis, deafness, or even blindness. Rosic from Nostali describes witchcraft in his region as different and categorized it according to color. There is black witchcraft to kill an enemy. There is red witchcraft to severely harm an enemy, but not kill him. And there is yellow witchcraft to make sure that an enemy falls ill, and white witchcraft to boost profits. Prior to 1998, killing sorcerers was quite rare, because in Banyuwangi the sorcerer would follow a code of ethics which states not to kill or harm villagers within the same village. Should, however, a sorcerer break that code, then he is forced to pronounce his innocence in a local mosque, and if he is found guilty, then he is exiled and his home is torched. But 1998 changed everything, and the code that protected the sorcerers was broken by none other than the villagers themselves. In 1998, Indonesia was a political tornado. There was a lot of civil unrest in the country, and naturally that affected the Banyuwangi region. Add the uncertainty of living with sorcerers, this fueled an atmosphere of hate, fear, and uneasiness. Then one night, all hell broke loose when ninjas began forming a mob and killing suspected sorcerers in their midst. This went on for several days. The local populace described these ninjas as some sort of supernatural entities that were purposely trained to kill sorcerers. They witnessed these hunters flying through the dark skies, disappearing behind walls, and even transforming into cats. There was a mass hysteria surrounding these ninjas coming from the local populace, but of course the outsiders merely shrugged this off as people's vivid imagination. "150 executions was a cowardly estimate of the number of people killed. Nicholas Harriman describes the death toll to exceed that of the Salem witch trials. However, there are a number of stories emerging of slain sorcerers over the course of the months, which explores the different reasons why they were killed. One of which is Ruslan. Ruslan was a suspected sorcerer who moved to the Kedalaman village in the Banyuwangi region about 30 years prior to 1998 by marrying a resident. Many of his neighbors suspected him to have evil powers. He would say something along the lines of, "Watch it or you'll get it," and people would normally fall sick due to this. Stories were spread about how he would also seduce other men's wives, and he turned out to be a nuisance in the whole village, and a lot of his peasant neighbors were scared of him. In 1998, with the ninjas killing sorcerers, they tried to get him, but he wasn't at home. Instead, they found him in a neighboring village. They captured him, brought him back to their own village, and they stoned him to death. Similarly, there was another case of Asemi. She was killed by her son-in-law, Misratin, in September 1998. Before she was killed, it was widely known that she was a sorcerer. She was banished from her own village twice after being found practicing sorcery. It is said that Misratin's father and Asemi had problems between them. His father owed debt to Asemi, so when she went to collect, he denied that he had any. So his father one night had a dream where he had been sprayed with water by Asemi, and he woke up the next morning ill with his stomach enlarged. Lastly, there is a story of Hassan, another accused sorcerer. Long before 1998, many people suspected that he was a sorcerer. Stories were spread of how he was involved in a spat with his cousin, and over the next weeks, his cousin's livestock began dying all of a sudden. Or there was a truck driver who had issues with his assistant, so he contracted Hassan to cause his assistant harm, and his assistant was ill the next day. The community and people gathered in an old cemetery on how to kill him. That's where they made their plans. They went to his house, but found he wasn't there. Then they searched the neighbor's house, and he was found under a bed in one of the neighbor's house without anyone knowing he was there. So they dragged him, beat him, knifed him, and then went to an old sandmine and hung his corpse over there. These were just a few stories of the 150 executions that took place. The supernatural side of this event may alleviate your vivid imagination as to how it went down. But there is a more rational side to this whole story. There seems to be a degree of supernatural element to the event. However, behind this event, many speculate that it could have been state forces at play here to change the region's politics. They probably use the supernatural beliefs of the locals as a tool to cause this event. As the killings progressed against the sorcerers, the so-called ninjas began attacking ulamas and Muslim clerics, and out of the 150 executions that took place, majority who were killed were Muslims who had a connection to the local Muslim organization, Nahdlatul Ulama. In the Banyuwangi region, the local Muslim community, politician and security apparatus have always had an uneasy relationship, so it doesn't come as a surprise when theories emerge of ninjas being used as a cover to conduct mass political execution. And this is a theory that Jason Brown from Inside Indonesia purports. He argues that Nahdlatul Ulama was a powerful local body organization in 1998 that began changing and transforming into a political organization, with a political upheaval happening in the whole of Indonesia around the same time. Now, they were transforming into a political organization, and this made some local politicians uneasy. Therefore, under the garb of ninjas and using sorcery as a tool, these politicians conducted attacks on local ulamas to drive them out, basically eliminating competition. Yet this anti-Muslim campaign didn't last long, and started to die out when people started killing suspected ninjas in the midst of their village. One such incident was when a suspected ninja was killed and his head was paraded around the village. And it was at that moment that state machinery was brought in to curb the situation, which further strengthens this theory that it could have been all politically motivated. There were stories narrated by ulama of narrowly thwarting attacks from ninjas who came from the shadows, which adds more evidence to this theory. But judging from their stories, there doesn't seem to be an element of supernatural from the ninjas, only that they seemed local and wore a black cloth over their face to make it seem like that they were ninjas. Yet there is another side to this that claims that when these ninjas were found, most of them were mad or driven to madness. Another theory emerges that states that these were fake ninjas which were swapped out with the real ones once the state began controlling the situation. But no one knows for sure what is true because there isn't anything conclusive to say who the perpetrators were. Till this day, these executions haven't been resolved. Once the Muslim community started killing the ninjas, the killing stopped all of a sudden, and now the question wasn't who was the sorcerer in our midst. It was who was the ninja. That question still remains to be a mystery, and though some people have been caught as suspected ninjas by the state and they have been punished, there is nothing about the true perpetrators of this event, and all of that is being hidden or has been forgotten. Maybe it was a politically motivated event to take out an upcoming rival organization that threatened the power hierarchy in the region. There is a lot of evidence to prove it was, and theories which are logically sound. But there are theories about it being a supernatural cleansing, a killing of sorcerers, and their ilk plaguing the homes and the sanctity of the villages for some time. Whatever the case, Banyuwangi still remains as one of the strongest places where black magic is still practiced even today. And whatever the case, I'll leave you to decide. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.